When the human she married unleashed his power, the alien queen could only stare in shock. The streets below buzzed with life as alien species from across the galaxy prepared to witness one of the most talked-about events in recent history: the marriage of Queen Velira of Zorath and Captain Elias Kane, a human ambassador from Earth. Velira sat in her chambers, her long, silver fingers tracing the edges of her ceremonial robe. Her scales caught the sunlight, glinting like diamonds. She had ruled her people for over a century, leading them with wisdom and strength. Yet today she felt something unfamiliar, unease. Humans were strange to her, fragile, unpredictable, and yet somehow intriguing. The chamber doors slid open with a whisper, and Velira's personal aide stepped inside. "Your Majesty, all is prepared. The ceremony will begin in 20 minutes. Velira nodded without speaking. She rose from her seat, her movement graceful and deliberate. As she walked toward the balcony, the sight below took her breath away. Thousands of spectators had gathered, their colors, shapes, and sizes as diverse as the stars themselves. Ships hovered silently in the sky, carrying dignitaries from distant planets. Every eye was on her and on the human she had agreed to marry. Meanwhile, in the human delegation's quarters, Captain Elias Kane adjusted his uniform. To anyone looking, he seemed calm, even ordinary, yet beneath that calm was a mind always analyzing, calculating, and preparing. Elias had trained for this moment, not in diplomacy alone, but in understanding the complex dance of interstellar politics. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Captain Kane, it is time," said his aide, a small robotic assistant with bright blue optics. Elias gave a short nod. "Let's make sure this goes smoothly." He stepped into the corridor, blending with the human entourage as they moved toward the grand hall. The ceremony hall was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. The floor shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting the ceiling, where a holographic galaxy rotated slowly. Pillars of crystal lined the walls, each engraved with the history of Zorath's rulers. At the center stood a dais where Velira waited. Her presence was commanding. Even the walls seemed to bend light around her, emphasizing her beauty and authority. When Elias entered, a hush fell over the hall. Many species stared, curious about this human who dared to marry their queen. Some whispered doubts about his strength, while others were intrigued by the novelty. Elias, however, moved with quiet confidence, his eyes meeting Velira's across the hall. She held his gaze for a moment, sharp and unyielding, as if trying to read him. The ceremony began with a series of rituals, each representing the union of two worlds. Aliens of different shapes and sizes stepped forward to offer blessings, their voices blending into a harmonious hum that filled the hall. Elias followed the protocol precisely, showing respect to the customs of Velira's people. His movements were deliberate, careful, yet he carried an air of calm that seemed almost unnerving to some of the observers. As the ceremony reached its peak, Velira felt a strange mix of emotions. She had agreed to this union for political reasons, to secure alliances, strengthen her empire, and maintain peace. Yet watching Elias, she felt a flicker of curiosity. There was something about him that set him apart from every human she had ever known. He was neither weak nor ordinary. His presence commanded attention without effort, and his calm seemed almost unnatural to her alien eyes. The efficient and ancient elder of Zorath raised his arms. "By the light of the twin suns and the witness of the cosmos, we unite Queen Velira of Zorath and Captain Elias Kane of Earth." Velira stepped forward, her ceremonial staff held firmly in her hand. Elias mirrored her movement, placing his hand gently over the ancient sigil etched into the dais. When their hands met, a subtle energy pulsed through the room. The crowd gasped not at a display of power, but at the undeniable connection between the two. After the formalities, the officiant spoke again. "Let this union symbolize not only the alliance of two civilizations, but also the potential of understanding, respect, and cooperation across the stars." Velira lowered her staff, glancing at Elias. She noted the slight smile on his lips, the quiet confidence in his posture. He had not shown any arrogance, only focus. And yet there was something beneath the surface, something hidden that she could not ignore. The ceremony concluded with music, alien instruments producing sounds both beautiful and strange to human ears. Velira walked beside Elias as they moved through the hall, greeting dignitaries. Every species seemed fascinated by the human queen's consort, many whispering about his unusual composure. Later, in private quarters, Valira addressed her aide. "Do you think he is truly prepared for what lies ahead?" she asked. The aide hesitated. "Your Majesty, humans are unpredictable, but Captain Kane, he carries himself with an unusual wisdom. Perhaps he will surprise us." Valira frowned. She had always trusted her instincts, and they told her that Elias was not simply a diplomat. There was more to him, something she could not yet define. Meanwhile, Elias observed the palace through a small window. Ships hovered in the distance, some scouting for threats, others arriving for the celebration. He understood that today was more than a ceremony, it was a test of trust, diplomacy, and subtle power. Humans were not the strongest species physically, but their minds were capable of astonishing feats, and he intended to demonstrate that quietly when the time came. The evening continued with a feast unlike any Elias had experienced. Foods from across the galaxy were laid out, flavors and textures he could barely name. Valira watched him navigate the table with grace, sampling delicacies, and interacting with aliens from worlds he had never visited. There was a certain charm in his manner, a combination of curiosity and respect that drew the attention of many. Yet amid the celebration, small alarms began to surface. Security drones detected unusual movements outside the palace perimeter. A rival faction had sent scouts, perhaps seeking to test the palace's defenses. Valira's sharp instincts noticed the tension first, and she stiffened, her eyes scanning the hall. Elias, noticing the subtle signals, did not panic. Instead, he calmly excused himself, moving toward the observation deck. His mind was already calculating responses, considering outcomes, and preparing contingencies. Valira followed, curious despite herself. She had expected fear or hesitation, perhaps confusion, but instead saw only focus and determination. Outside, the scouts' movements became bolder, attempting to breach the palace's defenses. Valira tensed, ready to summon the guard. Elias raised a hand, signaling her to wait. With precise commands, he directed the drones and palace security, his instructions clear and efficient. Within moments, the threat was neutralized without a single casualty. Valira could not hide her astonishment. She had expected humans to be fragile, unpredictable, or ineffective. Yet here was Elias, a man who had faced countless unknowns calmly and with strategy, his actions protecting her and her people. Later that night, as the city lights of Zorath Prime shimmered below them, Valira turned to Elias. "You handled danger differently than I imagined." Elias looked at her with a calm smile. "Humans have ways of surviving and adapting that many species underestimate. I learned that a long time ago." Valira studied him in silence, her thoughts racing. She realized that this union was no longer just a political arrangement. There was potential here, not only for alliances but for lessons, for understanding, and perhaps for admiration she had not expected to feel. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the worries of mortals and monarchs alike. But for Valira and Elias, the universe felt suddenly more alive, more unpredictable, and more full of possibility than either of them had imagined. As the night deepened, Valira retreated to her private chambers, but sleep did not come easily. She found herself thinking about the human she had married, not as a diplomat, not as a political tool, but as a being whose calm strength and quiet competence hinted at something extraordinary. She had married a man from another world, but perhaps she had married a force the galaxy was only beginning to understand. And somewhere deep in her mind, a spark of curiosity ignited. What else could he do? The morning sun rose over Zorath Prime, scattering pale gold light across the crystalline towers. Queen Valira stood on her balcony, watching the city stir. Below, citizens of her empire moved through the streets, some pausing to catch sight of their queen and her human consort. She could feel their curiosity, their surprise, even their doubt. Humans were rare here, and even the most educated of her people did not fully understand their capabilities. Captain Elias Kane emerged behind her, his uniform immaculate, his posture calm and precise. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady and even. Valira turned to him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you ever sleep, Captain Kane?" she asked, though she did not expect an answer. He gave a small smile. "Enough to function. Sleep is less important than awareness when one is far from home." Valira did not respond. She studied him as he leaned against the balcony railing, scanning the horizon with a quiet intensity. She was beginning to see what others did not. Humans were not physically imposing like many alien species, but they had something different. Focus, ingenuity, calm under pressure, and Elias carried these traits in abundance. The day began with formal meetings between Velira, Elias, and the leaders of Zorath Prime's allied worlds. In the Grand Council chamber, representatives from dozens of planets sat in tiered seats, their shapes and forms reflecting the diversity of the galaxy. Some had wings, others scales, some moved with multiple limbs, all watched the human with curiosity and some with doubt. Captain Kane, Velira introduced, will represent Earth in our council. He will speak on matters of trade, defense, and diplomacy. Elias stepped forward, his movements calm, measured. I am honored to serve in this capacity, he said. I will do my best to ensure cooperation benefits all parties involved. His voice carried authority, not because it was loud, but because it was confident and deliberate. The council members exchanged glances, unsure what to make of this human. Some whispered that he was arrogant, others whispered that he might be clever. No one truly knew. The first issue on the council agenda involved a minor dispute over trade routes in the nearby star system of Corin. Alien representatives argued, their voices rising in a symphony of incomprehensible sounds. Velira observed Elias carefully. He listened quietly, making notes on a small device that projected holographic diagrams in front of him. When he finally spoke, he did not interrupt, nor did he raise his voice to dominate. Instead, he presented solutions that considered everyone's concerns. He suggested staggered schedules, shared navigation protocols, and neutral checkpoints. The council was stunned. Many had expected conflict, but Elia's approach solved the dispute quickly. Velira could not hide her admiration. He did not rely on brute force or intimidation, as many alien leaders would have. He relied on thought, logic, and adaptability, human qualities she had once dismissed as fragile, but now saw as potent. After the council, Velira and Elias walked through the palace gardens. Crystalline flowers reflected the sun, and streams of liquid light curved through the grounds. Velira broke the silence. You handle alien politics as if it were simple, Captain Kane, yet we know it is anything but. Elias glanced at her. To humans, complexity is just another problem to solve. Every system has patterns. Every species has motivations. We find solutions by observing carefully and adapting quickly. Velira frowned. Observation and adaptation, is that all humans rely on? He shook his head. No. Courage, intuition, and cooperation are equally important. A human alone can accomplish some things, but together we can achieve much more than most species imagine. Velira reflected on his words. Perhaps that was why humans survived, even on their small, fragile planet. They did not have strength, speed, or natural armor like many alien species, yet they endured, thrived, and overcame challenges that would have defeated others. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. A palace guard approached, moving quickly across the gardens. Your Majesty, Captain Kane, we have an intrusion near the eastern gate. It may be scouts from the neighboring system of Draxus. Velira's eyes narrowed. Show me. They moved quickly, Elias ahead, analyzing the situation as they approached the eastern gate. Through the crystalline barriers, they saw a small group of cloaked figures attempting to bypass security sensors. The intruders were swift and careful, but they were no match for human ingenuity. Elias stepped forward and gave calm, precise commands. He instructed the guards to surround the intruders quietly, creating channels to trap them without violence. He adjusted the palace drones, guiding their flight paths to block escape routes. Within minutes, the intruders were contained, confused and surprised by how efficiently they were captured. Velira could hardly believe her eyes. Where she expected chaos or force, Elias had used thought, observation, and strategy to resolve the problem. Not a single guard was harmed, and the intruders were apprehended safely. Later, in a private chamber, Velira confronted him. Captain Kane, I must admit I underestimated you. He met her gaze calmly. Underestimation is common. Humans are often dismissed by other species. Yet we survive because we adapt, think, and act. That is our advantage. Velira turned away, pacing slowly. It is more than that. You do not only act, you inspire others to act. Your presence changes the way people respond, even your own allies. Elias inclined his head slightly. Leadership is about enabling others to do their best. Strength comes not from domination, but from cooperation. Valira studied him, realizing he was more than a diplomat. Perhaps he was not merely human, but something greater, a catalyst for change, capable of reshaping alliances, strategies, and even entire civilizations. The day continued with formal visits to the palace's defense operations. Alien generals demonstrated their technology, energy shields, weapon platforms, and advanced starships. Elias observed each system carefully, asking questions that were both simple and profound. He suggested minor adjustments to defensive protocols, showing how humans could compensate for alien limitations with clever planning and improvisation. One general raised an eyebrow. "You expect our species to change centuries of strategy based on human suggestions?" Elias smiled slightly. "I do not demand change, I offer perspective. Sometimes the smallest adjustment can have the greatest impact." Valira watched the exchange with a mix of pride and surprise. Her human consort was quietly earning respect, not through strength, but through intellect and adaptability. Aliens who had doubted humans began to reconsider. By evening, the palace held a smaller, more private reception. Valira and Elias moved among their guests, observing interactions, listening to concerns, and mediating misunderstandings. Each time a problem arose, a miscommunication between species, a logistical challenge, a minor diplomatic tension, Elias addressed it calmly and effectively. Valira found herself marveling at his patience and insight. She had married a human for political reasons, yet she was learning that he was more than a tool for alliances. He was a force in his own right, capable of shaping events in ways even she had not anticipated. As the reception drew to a close, Valira asked him quietly, "Do humans always have this capability?" Elias paused, considering the question. "Some do, some do not, but we share one common trait, the willingness to try even when the odds are against us. That is what makes humans remarkable." Valira looked out at the city once more, the lights of the towers reflecting in her eyes. She realized that this union was not just a political alliance, not just a marriage for appearances. It was a partnership between two beings who could teach each other, challenge each other, and perhaps even change the galaxy together. Later that night, in the quiet of her chambers, Valira reflected on the day. She had seen a glimpse of human capability, subtle yet undeniable. Elias had not only solved problems but inspired others, earning respect without aggression, demonstrating that strength came in many forms. She understood something important. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their greatest power was not physical strength or technology, but adaptability, creativity, and courage. And Elias Kane embodied all of these qualities in abundance. As she lay down to rest, Valira felt a mix of anticipation and curiosity. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and unknowns, yet she had a human at her side, one who could see patterns others missed, act with precision, and turn chaos into opportunity. She realized that the coming days would reveal even more about his abilities. And she could not wait to see what he would do next. Outside the palace, the city of Zorath Prime glittered under twin moons. Alien guards patrolled the streets, unaware that the human queen had married might be quietly observing, calculating, and preparing for challenges far greater than anyone could imagine. And so the uneasy alliance began, a human and an alien queen, navigating a galaxy of politics, threats, and mysteries, each learning from the other, each preparing for the trials yet to come. The first day of their partnership had ended, but the real test, the one that would challenge everything Valira believed about humans, was only beginning. The morning light of Zorath Prime barely touched the tops of the crystal towers when the palace's alarm system began to hum. Queen Valira was already awake, her silver eyes scanning the city below from her balcony. Something felt off. The air was unusually still, and even the distant hum of hovering ships seemed faint, as if the city itself were holding its breath. "Your Majesty," a voice called. Valira turned to see her aide rushing toward her. "We are detecting unauthorized vessels approaching from the Draxis system. Their formation is aggressive. They may be preparing for an attack." Valira's eyes narrowed. "Alert the council and activate the palace defense protocols," she commanded, her voice calm yet firm. Then she added quietly, almost to herself, "And summon the human." Within moments, Captain Elias Kane was at her side. He had already analyzed the alert with his own device, a compact system that could interface with the palace's security network. His calm presence contrasted sharply with the tension in the air. "Tell me everything," Valira said. Elias outlined the situation succinctly. Multiple scout ships are approaching from the Draxis system. Their flight patterns suggest coordinated maneuvers, likely a probe to test our defenses. They will likely attack if they find a weakness. Valira observed him closely. She had seen him handle minor disturbances before, but this was different. This was not a small problem. This could escalate into war. "What do you propose?" she asked. Elias paused, thinking, "We do not want to engage unnecessarily. Our goal is to defend without causing a full-scale conflict unless they force us. I suggest a combination of tactical positioning, electronic interference, and targeted deployment of defense drones. We can neutralize the threat before they reach the city." Valira hesitated. "Our generals will question your methods. This is unconventional." Elias smiled faintly. "Unconventional does not mean ineffective." The Queen watched as Elias began issuing commands. He coordinated palace drones to form a layered perimeter around the approaching vessels. Using a combination of calculated projections and subtle electronic interference, he disrupted the enemy's communication network. The Draxis scouts began to maneuver erratically, unsure of their objective. Valira could hardly believe what she saw. Where most leaders would have relied on brute force, Elias used intelligence, strategy, and precision. Every move was deliberate, every action calculated. Within minutes, the scout ships were disabled or rerouted safely away from the city. No casualties, no damage, only efficiency. The palace generals were stunned. "Captain Kane," one of them said, "how did you—" Elias gave a calm nod. "Observation, prediction, and adaptation, it is the human way." Valira felt a mix of awe and disbelief. Humans were supposed to be fragile, unpredictable, and physically weak compared to alien species. Yet here was a human controlling an entire defense system with nothing but thought, strategy, and quiet confidence. Later that day, Valira and Elias convened a private meeting with the council. The generals still questioned his methods, skeptical of a human directing military defenses. Elias spoke slowly, explaining his decisions. He showed how small, calculated interventions could prevent large-scale conflict. He demonstrated the logic behind his strategies using clear examples, illustrating how even advanced alien technology could be used more effectively with careful planning and human ingenuity. Valira observed silently, impressed not only by his intellect but by the calm authority he carried. She realized that Elias' power was not in physical strength or advanced weaponry, but in his mind. His ability to analyze, predict, and act swiftly in complex situations was extraordinary, perhaps even beyond what her own species could achieve. The council eventually agreed to follow his instructions. The palace implemented his strategies fully, deploying drones and adjusting fleet positions according to Elias' calculations. The Draxis ships, now facing an organized and adaptive defense, hesitated and eventually retreated. The immediate threat was neutralized without a single life lost. Valira could not hide her amazement. She had expected a human to assist diplomatically, perhaps manage minor issues. She had not expected him to orchestrate the defense of an entire planetary capital so flawlessly. As the tension eased, Valira and Elias walked through the palace gardens. "You do not act like other humans I have read about," she said, her voice quiet. "Most would panic in a situation like that." Elias shrugged slightly. "Panic rarely solves anything. Humans survive because we think, adapt, and cooperate. Fear is a tool, but not one to guide action." Valira pondered his words. "You inspire loyalty even among my generals. That is unusual. Most species respect power, not thought." Elias looked at her, calm and sincere. "Leadership is not about domination. It is about guiding others to act with their best abilities. Strength is not always physical." Valira realized that this human was showing her a new way of thinking. Her empire had relied on strength, hierarchy, and intimidation for centuries. Yet Elias' methods, though different, were effective and elegant. The rest of the day was filled with smaller crises: a miscommunication between allied fleets, a minor technical malfunction in the city's energy grid, and an unexpected solar flare affecting communications. Each time, Elias addressed the problem calmly, analyzing the situation and implementing solutions quickly and efficiently. By evening, even Valira's most skeptical generals were silent, observing the human with cautious respect. She could see it in their expressions, disbelief turning into admiration. Elia's presence had not only resolved crises but elevated everyone around him. Later, in the quiet of the royal chambers, Valira turned to Elias. "You handle challenges in a way I did not expect. You do not merely react, you foresee, adapt, and guide others." Elias nodded. "That is the human way. We survive and thrive not because we are the strongest, but because we can think, learn, and work together. Adaptation is our greatest strength." Valira remained silent, reflecting on what she had witnessed. She had married a human for political reasons, yet she was learning that he was extraordinary. His mind, his courage, and his ability to inspire others were unlike anything she had seen in her long life. The next morning, another alert came. This time, it was a larger threat. A fleet from Draxus had launched a coordinated attack on the outer sectors of the planetary system. Valira's council panicked, unsure how to respond. Elias remained calm. "We have the advantage," he said simply. "We know their patterns, their likely strategies, and their weaknesses. We can defend without unnecessary risk. We only need to act with precision and coordination." Valira watched him prepare. He moved among the generals, explaining strategies, assigning roles, and anticipating outcomes. Every move was calculated, yet he allowed for flexibility, knowing that unexpected events were inevitable. When the Draxus fleet arrived, Elia's strategy unfolded perfectly. The palace defenses and allied fleets acted in coordination, guided by his instructions. Enemy ships were neutralized or forced to retreat with minimal losses. Valira observed the battle from the observation deck, awe growing with each passing moment. Elia's calmness, precision, and insight had turned what could have been a disaster into a decisive defense. Her admiration deepened, tinged with a sense of shock. She had underestimated humans and underestimated him. After the battle, the palace held a formal debriefing. Generals and council members praised Elias, though some still struggled to understand his methods. Valira, however, did not need explanation. She had seen the results. Humans, she realized, possessed a kind of power that many species overlooked. Adaptability, creativity, and courage combined in ways that could surpass even the most technologically advanced species. That night, Valira stood alone on her balcony, staring at the stars. She reflected on the events of the past 2 days. A human she had married, a species she had once considered fragile and limited, had not only defended her city but inspired her people, influenced her council, and demonstrated that true strength came from intelligence, courage, and adaptability. She thought of Elias, calm and composed even in the face of danger. She realized that her initial skepticism had been misplaced. This human was not just a consort or diplomat. He was a force quietly shaping events in ways few could predict. Valira understood that the days ahead would test them both further. The Draxus fleet had retreated, but the galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers and challenges. She had no doubt that Elias would continue to surprise her, revealing strengths that even she could not yet imagine. For the first time in her long reign, Valira felt a mix of excitement and anticipation. She was not only witnessing human capability firsthand, she was experiencing it. And she knew that her alliance with Elias Kane would change everything, not just for her, but for Zorath Prime and perhaps the galaxy itself. As the twin moons rose above the crystalline towers, Valira whispered to herself, "I underestimated humans, but not anymore." And somewhere in a quiet chamber, Elias reviewed the day's events, adjusting strategies, analyzing outcomes, and preparing for whatever challenges the universe would throw at them next. He did not boast, nor did he seek recognition. He acted because he must, because humans survived by thinking, adapting, and facing the unknown with courage. And in doing so, he had earned the awe of an alien queen. The stars above Zorath Prime seemed to glow brighter than usual that night, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Queen Valira stood on the observation deck, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. Reports had come in that the Draxus forces had regrouped and were now approaching with full strength. This was no longer a mere test. It was a true threat to her planet and people. She turned as Captain Elias Kane stepped beside her. Despite the magnitude of the danger, he appeared calm. His posture was straight, his eyes steady, as if the approaching fleet were a simple puzzle waiting to be solved rather than a deadly enemy. "Captain Kane," Valira began, her voice tight with tension, "this is far larger than anything we have faced before. Are you certain we can withstand them? Elias glanced at the fleet on the holomap. Ships as large as moons glided through space, their weapons systems bristling with deadly intent. Yet his expression did not waver. We can, he said simply. We know their patterns, we understand their likely strategies, and we have advantages they cannot anticipate. Valira raised an eyebrow. And what advantages would those be? Elias smiled faintly. Human ingenuity, adaptation, creativity, courage, tools they cannot measure, predict, or control. Valira studied him, a shiver running through her. She had begun to understand the truth of his abilities, but the coming battle would reveal them fully. The palace council convened immediately. Generals, scientists, and diplomats crowded the chamber, voices overlapping as fear and uncertainty spread. Draxus fleets were formidable. Their technology rivaled Zorath's own in every way. Many council members doubted the humans could provide real help. Elias did not raise his voice or demand attention. He simply began outlining a strategy, calmly and logically. He suggested dividing their defense into 3 layers. Outer interceptors to disrupt the enemy formation, middle fleets to protect the capital system, and inner defensive drones to safeguard the planet itself. He incorporated the unique capabilities of each allied species, assigning them roles that used their strengths efficiently. Wings for fast maneuvers, telepaths for communication disruption, and energy manipulators for shielding. Each adjustment was calculated, precise, and flexible, allowing room for unexpected maneuvers from the enemy. Valira could feel the tension in the room begin to ease. The council members who had doubted him now listened intently. For the first time, they seemed to realize that this human could see and understand patterns that others could not. As the battle began, the Draxus fleet approached with speed and aggression. Their leaders expected a chaotic response from the defenders, but Elias had anticipated this. The outer interceptors, guided by his strategy, moved like chess pieces, forcing the enemy into traps and blind zones. Energy pulses disabled communications on key Draxus ships, sowing confusion among their ranks. Valira watched in awe as the battle unfolded. Ships moved in perfect coordination, their paths and attacks synchronized under Elias' guidance. He adapted instantly to every unexpected move the Draxus fleet made, issuing new commands that neutralized threats without unnecessary destruction. She realized, with growing astonishment, that this human's mind worked in ways alien leaders could scarcely comprehend. He was not relying on brute force or intimidation. He was using intelligence, prediction, and adaptability, qualities that allowed humans to survive and thrive against overwhelming odds. The Draxus fleet, frustrated and unable to adapt to the defenders' unexpected tactics, began to falter. Even their most advanced ships were caught in patterns they could not predict. Each time they tried to regroup, Elias anticipated and countered their moves with precision. Valira's admiration deepened. She had known humans could be clever, resilient, and brave, but she had not realized the full extent of their potential. Her human consort was demonstrating a level of strategic brilliance she had never seen, even among the galaxy's most experienced leaders. In the midst of the battle, a critical moment arose. A Draxus flagship broke through the outer interceptors and moved directly toward the capital. Alarms blared throughout the palace, and the council panicked. Valira's instincts screamed at her to command a full assault, but Elias remained calm. He analyzed the situation, noting the ship's weaknesses and its blind spots. With a few precise commands, he directed a combination of energy pulses, drone maneuvers, and fleet positioning to divert the flagship safely away from the planet, capturing it intact without a single casualty. The council was speechless. The Draxus flagship, which could have destroyed millions of lives, had been neutralized by a human strategy, not by overwhelming power, but by intellect and foresight. Valira turned to him, her voice trembling with awe. "Captain Kane, you have done the impossible." Elias shook his head slightly. "I have only done what humans have always done, observed, adapted, and acted when necessary. Survival is not about strength alone, it is about intelligence and courage." The remainder of the battle continued in similar fashion. Each Draxus maneuver was countered, each attack neutralized. Allies who had doubted him now followed his lead without hesitation, trusting his judgment completely. Even Valira found herself relying on his decisions, watching with growing respect as he guided the defense flawlessly. By the time the Draxus fleet retreated, the capital's system was unharmed and casualties were minimal. Celebration erupted among the defenders, but Velira remained on the observation deck, processing what she had witnessed. She realized that Ilia's abilities went far beyond strategy. He had inspired loyalty, coordinated diverse forces, and turned potential chaos into victory. His human traits, adaptability, creativity, courage, and intelligence, had reshaped the battlefield in ways no alien could have anticipated. Velira felt a surge of admiration, mixed with a strange sense of awe. She had married a human to secure an alliance, but she had gained something far greater, a partner capable of extraordinary feats, a being whose mind and spirit could influence entire civilizations. Later, in private, Velira confronted him. You are more than I imagined. Humans are remarkable, but you are exceptional even among your own species. Ilias gave a faint smile. I am no different from other humans. We survive by thinking, adapting, and working together. I simply do what is necessary. Velira shook her head. No. You have done more than survive. You have changed the outcome of a battle that could have destroyed millions. You have shown me, all of us, what humans can achieve, and it is astonishing. Ilias looked at her steadily. Humans are often underestimated. But we endure, we adapt, and we find solutions when others cannot. That is our strength. Velira realized that this revelation was not just about the battle. It was about perspective, about understanding that power did not always come from size, strength, or technology. True strength could come from creativity, intelligence, courage, and the willingness to act decisively in the face of danger. She had expected a consort, a diplomat, a representative of a distant, fragile species. Instead, she had found a force of nature, quietly brilliant, whose abilities surpassed many she had long admired in other alien leaders. That night, as the twin moons reflected in the crystalline towers of Zorath Prime, Velira stood beside Ilias, watching the stars. She could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing around them, threats, challenges, unknown dangers, yet she also felt hope. With this human at her side, she knew that no obstacle was insurmountable. Tomorrow, she said quietly, the galaxy may test us again. But I am no longer afraid. Ilias turned to her, calm as ever. We face what comes together. Fear is natural, but action guided by thought and courage is stronger. Velira nodded, realizing that she had witnessed more than victory. She had witnessed a revelation, the full extent of human potential embodied in the man she had married. And she knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers, mysteries, and opportunities. But with Ilias Kane, she felt a new certainty. Humans could face the impossible, adapt, and overcome. Her admiration deepened into trust, respect, and something she could not yet name, a recognition that humans, though small and fragile compared to many species, could shape the fate of worlds. And her consort was the living proof. For the first time in her reign, Velira felt the excitement of possibility. The alliance she had entered for political reasons had transformed into something far greater, a partnership that could redefine the future of her empire and perhaps the galaxy itself. As she turned to leave, she whispered to herself, the galaxy has underestimated humans, but no longer. And somewhere in the quiet of the night, Ilias prepared for the challenges yet to come. He did not seek glory, nor did he need it. He acted because humans survive by thinking, adapting, and acting when the moment demands. And in doing so, he had shown Velira and the galaxy that humans were a force to be reckoned with, brilliant, courageous, and limitless in their potential. The skies over Zorath Prime were calm at last, a rare peace settling over the crystalline towers. The twin moons reflected off the city's structures, painting everything in soft silver and gold. For the first time in weeks, Queen Velira allowed herself a moment to breathe. The Draxus fleet had retreated, the battles were over, and the immediate danger had passed. Yet the air still held a tension born not of fear, but of anticipation. Velira knew that the galaxy would not remain silent for long. Threats would arise again. Challenges would test her empire and her alliances. But this time, she was not alone. Beside her stood Captain Ilias Kane, observing the city with quiet attention. His calm presence had become a constant in her life, a reminder that even in chaos, human ingenuity and courage could find solutions. She had once doubted humans, seen them as fragile and unpredictable. Now she knew better. Tomorrow, Velira said softly, we will need to rebuild what was damaged, strengthen our alliances, and prepare for what comes next. Elias nodded. That is why preparation is important. The galaxy does not wait for anyone. We must anticipate and adapt. Valira turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting a mixture of respect and awe. I underestimated your kind. I underestimated you. He gave a faint, modest smile. You only see what is necessary when the moment arrives. Humans survive by learning and adapting. That is all. She studied him, realizing that his humility was part of what made him extraordinary. He did not seek glory or recognition, yet his actions had saved millions of lives and altered the course of her empire. In the following days, the palace was filled with activity. Scientists repaired damaged systems, engineers recalibrated defense grids, and diplomats negotiated renewed treaties. And throughout it all, Elias remained at the center, coordinating, advising, and guiding with quiet efficiency. It was not just his strategic mind that impressed Valira, but his ability to unite people. Aliens who had once doubted humans now worked alongside them, inspired by his calm leadership. He communicated not through force or dominance, but by demonstrating logic, courage, and foresight. Valira realized that she had been wrong to see humans as weak. They were a species that thrived not through physical might, but through adaptability, intelligence, and resilience. And Elias Kane embodied those qualities more fully than anyone she had ever met. One evening, as the palace gardens glowed under the moons, Valira walked with Elias along the crystalline paths. The flowers glimmered like stars and streams of liquid light curved between the towers. For a moment the world felt peaceful, a sharp contrast to the battles of the previous days. You have changed the way my people see humans, she said quietly. They once thought of your kind as fragile, limited, and unpredictable. Now they respect you and perhaps fear the potential of what you represent. Elias looked at her, calm and steady. Humans are underestimated too often, but we do not seek fear. We seek understanding, cooperation, and the chance to act when necessary. That is how we endure and thrive. Valira nodded, thinking of the battles, the crises, and the challenges he had navigated. She realized that this partnership, born of politics, had become far more than a formal alliance. It was a meeting of minds, of strengths, of perspectives. She had married not only a human, but a force capable of shaping the future. The following weeks were a whirlwind of diplomacy. Leaders from allied systems arrived to witness the aftermath of the Draxus conflict and to assess the strength of Zorath Prime. Many were wary at first, but Elia's calm authority and clear strategies impressed them. They began to see humans as a species of remarkable potential, not merely fragile beings from a distant world. Valira observed these interactions closely. She realized that humans, guided by individuals like Elias, could influence the galaxy in ways no one had imagined. Their strength was subtle, their power not in weapons or raw force, but in creativity, adaptability, and courage. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Valira and Elias sat in the palace's high observation tower, looking out at the city. Lights sparkled like stars reflected on the ground. She spoke softly, as if sharing a secret. You have shown me something extraordinary, not just strategy or courage, but a new way to think about power, leadership, and survival. I am honored to be allied with you to share this path. Elias met her gaze, his calm eyes reflecting the same quiet determination she had come to admire. I am honored to serve your majesty, but it is not about me alone. Humans survive and thrive because we learn, adapt, and work together. You have allowed us to demonstrate that potential. Valira smiled faintly. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new era, not only for my empire, but for how the galaxy sees humans. Elias inclined his head. I believe it is, and with careful thought, cooperation, and courage, that era can last. In the days that followed, Valira began to implement changes across her empire. She encouraged innovation, collaboration, and creative problem-solving. She allowed humans and aliens to work together on defense strategies, technological research, and diplomatic initiatives. The palace became a center of learning and adaptation, a place where humans could teach, inspire, and contribute in ways the galaxy had not anticipated. Valira watched as her people grew to respect humans. Aliens who had once doubted Captain Kane now sought his advice, followed his strategies, and learned from his example. Valira realized that this respect was not born of fear, nor of obligation, but of admiration for ingenuity, courage, and the willingness to act decisively in the face of uncertainty. In private moments, Valira reflected on what she had witnessed. She had married a human for politics, for alliances, and for stability. Yet she had gained far more. She had gained insight into a species she had underestimated, and into a man whose intelligence, courage, and creativity had saved her planet and inspired her people. She thought of the battles, the crises, and the challenges they had overcome together. She realized that Elias had not simply protected her empire. He had reshaped it, elevating humans and inspiring new ways of thinking. One evening, as the city lights shimmered below, Velira spoke quietly to Elias. "I once thought humans were fragile. I was wrong. You have shown me that strength comes in many forms: intelligence, adaptability, courage. And you have proven that one person can change the fate of many." Elias looked at her steadily. "Humans endure because we do not accept limits that others impose. We observe, we adapt, we act. That is our power." Velira nodded, her admiration deepening into something she could not fully name. She had seen the truth of his words in the battles, the strategies, and the calm authority with which he had guided allies and defended her empire. She understood that this was only the beginning of a partnership that could change the galaxy. The palace began to celebrate their victory, but Velira remained focused on the future. She walked through the gardens at night, reflecting on what she had learned. Humans were not merely survivors, they were catalysts, capable of inspiring, leading, and reshaping the world around them. And Elias Kane was living proof. In the months that followed, Zorath Prime grew stronger than ever. Trade flourished, diplomacy improved, and defenses were more advanced and adaptive than any had thought possible. Humans, led by Elias, were now respected and trusted across allied systems. Velira watched as her people learned from humans, adopting new strategies, thinking creatively, and embracing adaptability. She saw the seeds of a new era taking root, an era where strength was measured not just by weapons, but by intelligence, courage, and collaboration. One quiet night, Velira stood with Elias atop the palace tower, watching the city lights dance like stars. "The galaxy may test us again," she said softly. Elias nodded. "It will, and when it does, we will be ready, together." Velira smiled, a sense of certainty filling her. She had witnessed human courage, ingenuity, and determination firsthand. She had married a man who embodied the best of his species, a man who could face the impossible, adapt, and overcome. And she knew that with him by her side, the future of her empire and perhaps the galaxy would never be the same. As the twin moons reflected over the crystalline towers, Velira whispered to herself, "We are ready. The galaxy is ready, and humans are extraordinary." Elias looked at her, calm as ever, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had not only defended a planet and saved millions of lives, they had begun a partnership that would shape the galaxy for generations to come. The stars above Zorath Prime shone brighter than ever, reflecting hope, courage, and the limitless potential of humans. And at the heart of it all, Captain Elias Kane and Queen Velira stood side by side, allies, partners, and witnesses to the dawn of a new era.